You're watching Alaska's news source, KTUU, Channel 2 Anchorage. This is the Channel 2 News Hour.
Good evening. Those who experience mental illness say a big part of the problem is that no one listens to them.
Today, before the Alaska Psychiatric Institute's advisory board, they had their chance. Channel 2's Rhonda McBride joins us now with details. Rhonda.
Mike and Maria, the API board meets quarterly, and except for executive sessions, their meetings are public, but they don't feel very public to the former patients who come to testify. They must sign in to attend and go behind the locked doors of API.
API has a shiny new building, but have inadequate written policies.
But those who came to testify hope to change that.
And that lack of good policies make API a second-rate hospital and not good for patient recovery.
The complaints range from changing the bedding more often to the over-reliance of psychiatric drugs to the use of force.
Strapping a patient to a gurney or other device as a means of restraint, using force to medicate a patient, and physical takedowns.
Faith Meyer says API needs to make it easier for patients to make complaints. Several former patients also testified about the impact of psychiatric drugs.
The drug caused the seizures.
The main complaint, that there are simply not enough services.
There's a lot of people who end up turning into being alcoholics and drug addicts.
Former patients told the board that API's policies are frequently driven by cost and convenience and not what's best for the patient. But cost is one of the biggest challenges for the Institute.
I see the cuts coming already. This federal grant is cut. That federal grant is cut.
The State Health and Social Services Commissioner told the API board there will be pressure to cut down hospital stays at the Institute, which runs about $1,200 a day per patient. Another challenge for API is keeping psychiatrists on staff. The Institute frequently has to hire them from an agency at about twice the cost.
Each position that we're filling for a rent-a-doctor costs us approximately $520,000 a year for one rent-a-doctor.
API says it stepped up its recruiting efforts and expects to be fully staffed by this fall.
Everybody does a lot of work. There's a lot of good things happening here.
Keeping good things happening depends on finding ways to reinvent mental health care in ways that save money but also improve the quality of treatment. And one big change ahead, API will soon have a peer support program where patients can get help from those who have recovered from mental illness. API, by the way, is coming up on its 50th anniversary. It was built in 1962 to bring patients that were sent to Portland, Oregon home. Back in those days, almost all patients were sent outside Alaska for treatment.
So, Rhonda, it seemed like there weren't too many people there to testify today. Why was that?
Well, there were about a half a dozen people there, and typically people who have experienced mental illness are often reluctant to be public about it due to the stigma. But the chairman of the board says that there were more people than usual today. He also says that the board is looking at changing the location rather than having public meetings behind API's locked doors, which has been the practice. And several of those people who testified today have been patients at API and have also been instrumental in bringing about change to the hospital.
All right, thanks, Rhonda. Channel 2's Rhonda McBride reporting.